In this lesson, we are going to talk about solving one-step equations using only integers. So, I can solve one-step equations. You could pause this video anytime you would like, get the notes on Schoology. Always pause if you feel like I'm going too quickly. Before we begin solving, we have to talk about a few vocabulary terms. An equation, this is a mathematical sentence that uses an equal sign to show that the left side of the equal sign is the same as the right side of the equal sign, right? We're balancing it out. The left side is equal to the right side. What is an inverse operations? Inverse operations is an operation that operations that undo each other. In the inverse of addition is subtraction, and you'll hear me talk about a zero pair quite frequently when dealing with inverse operations. The inverse operations of multiplication is division. But there are a couple of rules you need to always abide by when solving one-step equations. So when solving an equation, your goal is to get the variable. Could be an x, or it could be anything alone by itself on one side of the equation. In other words, you are trying to isolate the variable. You want the variable all by itself. When solving for a variable, you must use inverse operations to isolate the variable on one side of the equation. Okay, but whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side of the equation. You need to keep the equation balanced. I can't add too much on one side and not the other. Look at this. Take a look at this picture of the hamster holding the weights. If I only add weights on one side, it's going to be lopsided. It is unbalanced. So if I add or subtract weights from one side of the barbell, you must add or subtract the same amount of weight from the other side of the barbell to keep it balanced. So that's how you want to do this. Okay, so now let's move on to solving one-step equations using addition or subtraction. Once again, you must use inverse operation to isolate the variable on one side. Same thing if I add or subtract a number to one side, you must add or subtract the same number from the other side of the equation. Always ask yourself, how can I isolate this variable or get it alone? What operation do I need to use to solve the equation? So let's take a look. Solve each equation for the variable. Right on my left side, if it helps, you could draw a line down the middle. I have x right here. I want x by itself. So I have to get rid of this plus 4. So how I get rid of it? I use the inverse operation. Instead of plus 4, I'm going to do minus 4. So take a look here. This is a zero pair. Why? Because if I were to add these two numbers up, I get a 0. Right? Plus 4, negative 4, that's a 0. That's what I want every single time. So if I subtract 4 to one side, I need to do it to the other side. So get x equals 6 minus 4 is 2. Letter B, same thing. If it helps, you could draw a line. I have y minus 5, so I have to do plus 5. Remember, 0, I need to create a 0 pair every single time. Here, y is equal to 17. Okay, this is how I want you to show work every single time. So yes, you do need to show work, even though you can do it in your head. Do 1 and 2 on your own. Okay, next. You can express one-step equations in different ways. It does not change how you solve the problem. So let's take a look at this one. Even though I have the variable on the right side, you solve it the same way. I do plus 2, you get 13 is equal to t. You could write t equals 13. Order does not matter. Letter B, same thing. I have y plus 6, so I have to do minus 6, right? Minus 6, negative 17. Minus 6 is equal to negative 23 is equal to y. Y equals negative 23. So you solve these problems exactly the same way. Try 3 and 4 on your own. Example 3. Whenever you see a variable by itself, there is a 1 in front of it. Rewrite each variable expression or equation so that the number in front of each variable is visible. Do not solve. So remember, this is 1x, this is 1y, this is 1x, and this is 1t over 4. That's all you need to do. Why? Because you'll see what we get into in a little bit. So solving one-step equations by multiplying or dividing. When I'm solving an equation, you must use, this is exactly the same thing as earlier, inverse operations to isolate the variable on one side of the equation. Remember, if I multiply or divide a number from one side of the equation, you must multiply or divide the same number from each side of the equation. So for example, let's take a look at these two examples. I have 2 times p equals 18. Divide by 2, divide by 2. These two simplify to be a 1 and 1. I get 1p is equal to 9. Same thing here, but z divided by 14. So I can multiply by 14, multiply by 14, 14 over 1. So these simplify to be 1 and 1. So I get z is equal to 28. Remember, if I'm ever going too quickly, pause the video, rewatch it until you understand. That's a sign of a really good student. Why don't you try 5 and 6 on your own? All right, we're almost done here. Hang in there. Whenever you see a negative sign in front of a variable, there is a -1 in front of it. So for example, rewrite each variable expression or equation so that the number in front of each variable is visible. Do not solve. So what this is saying is -1x, -1y, -1x, and -1t over 4. So any time you have an x all by itself, a variable all by itself, there is a negative sign in front. So solving one-step equations with negatives. Remember, you are solving for the positive variable, not the negative. If you get a negative variable by itself, divide by -1. So what does that mean? We have 3 examples here. Let's do these 3 examples. I have -d plus 3 equals -6. Solve it the same way. 0 pair. So I have -d, right, because I have the negative sign in front, is equal to -9. But I want a positive. Remember what we just wrote. If I have a negative, I divide by -1, divide by -1. Why do I do that? Well, then this becomes a positive. D equals +9. Same thing with letter B. Divide by -1, divide by -1. Remember, you always have to do the same thing to both sides. Why do I divide? Because remember, I have a -1 in front of my x, right? Because it's -1 times x. So I have to do divide by -1, divide by -1. X equals +2. Oh, excuse me, -2. Okay? Next example, I have -g over 3. Remember, a fraction means division, so I have to do multiply times 3 times 3. I get -g is equal to +24. But I have to divide by -1, divide by -1. I get g is equal to -24. Okay? So using this way, why don't you try 7 through 10 on your own, and then afterwards fill out your level of understanding. If you have any questions, hold on to them, and we will cover them in class on the next available day. Bye, all.